And the other thing is, of course, if you can actually make an impact with a big company, you are going to get follow-on, sales. It's a long relationship, especially in Japan.
Before we get started, I want to do a brief, very brief, round of quick introductions for the panel. And I'll start. My name is Tim Romero. I've been in Japan, more than 30 years now. I've started 4 startups here. I helped TEPCO and JIRA start up their CVC programs. I ran Google for Startups for about 4 years. And I run a podcast called Disrupting Japan. Like and subscribe and all that. And that's me.
Thank you. Good to meet everybody. You can call me Dennis. I'm the head of corporate strategy and development for Yanmar. I've been in Japan for just over 6 years now. Originally, I came with McKinsey, where I was an associate partner. And through that, I also got the experience to work with a lot of, I would say, most of the larger companies in Japan on topics covering strategy, business development, and technology disruptions.
All right, thank you. My name is Felix. I've been in Japan for over 10 years. I came for my PhD, then I did some more robots research, and then I decided I want to make something real big happen at Mujin, and I joined 4 years ago, and now I'm CTO there.
Hi, my name is Aveek. I'm the co-founder and CTO of Guide Robotics, that's based in Tokyo, Japan. My background, I got my PhD from the University of Pennsylvania quite a while ago. Have been in robotics R&D, computer vision, and robotics, working at SRI International for more than a decade. And then I did a spin out in Silicon Valley. And and I love working on robotics technology and being on panels.
Great. So I think we are lucky to be able to get this opinion from both sides. But when you're doing a proof of concept, when you're doing that initial engagement with an enterprise, or in your case, when you're deciding to work with a startup, what are you after? What are your goals? What do you want from this? Are you looking for revenue? Are you looking for exposure, investment, future sales? Felix, what are you looking for with these initial engagements?
When you first asked me that, my first reaction was, well, it kind of depends. We do a lot of different things with different companies with different reasons, right? But I think in the early stage, a big thing that you need is a feedback loop from a real customer. And we consider the business the customer, so that's the number one thing. Iterate quickly, get real opinions from people with skin in the game.
So when you're getting this feedback, is this feedback for how to improve your product, how to move this to a larger sale? What's the feedback you're looking for?
All of that's right. Feedback on the actual usability on the product, what they want to have happen later, what other needs they have that we didn't even think of. All of those are valuable data points.
Okay, excellent. Aveek, what about you? What are you looking for?
Apart from shaking out the product market fit, right? Basically, that's definitely the key. The other thing is a matter of basically you want big companies to trust what they're asking you to do, and when you deliver, you basically try to gauge whether they're happy with it, and that's one thing. And the other thing is, of course, if you can actually make an impact with a big company, you are going to get follow-on, sales. It's a long relationship, especially in Japan. It's true even in the US, but you basically get the vote of confidence to move forward. And also, I would say, basically it's a revenue generation, and also you mentioned publicity. That's also true. If you can get the permission to share that information, that hey, these people are our customers, that helps as well.
Now, I noticed it's interesting. Neither of you mentioned investment at all as a potential target. Is it that POCs and these initial engagements generally don't lead to investment, or it's just a lower priority?
You want to go first?
Yeah, so I can say, the investment angle is an interesting question. And usually, I think you have a sense of whether they can be an investment partner before you do it, right? So it's like, if you're just going to any company and trying to sell, it doesn't play that way. But I have had an experience where there are early adopters, so you can tell that they are early adopters, and you also know that they are interested in funding startups. But it's difficult to. There are not that many companies who are that open about especially in Japan. I think it's very, very difficult. I think CVC is like. I think I'll let Felix answer more.
Yeah, this might be colored from my background because we're targeting industrial robotics, so we deal with a lot of very established companies, and they move slowly. I don't think we really ever had on our radar to get another investor from that side. Also, if you do lean into that a lot, you can suffer from a form of audience capture, and I don't think it's usually a good play. I think your investors are usually separate from your customers.
Makes sense. So pitch, if you're looking for investment, pitch the investors. Dennis, what about from your point of view? I mean, I know you can't speak for all enterprises, but speaking for your particular enterprise, when you're looking to do business with a startup, what are you looking for? What is the enterprise hoping to get out of it?
Yeah. And for the record, I would like to speak for as many enterprises as possible, not particularly for Yanmar, only because that's my opinion. No, but look, I think from the perspective of a corporate, most should have an idea of what they're lacking and what they cannot get either through their in-house capabilities or through their immediate and existing established partners. And for example, in our case, we just went through our 5-year strategy work, and one of the focus areas that we had was what are the capabilities that we'll need in 10 years that we don't have today, we cannot develop, and we need to invest in, right? So I would say the first thing that we would be interested in is either let's say secured access to technology or capabilities that we cannot do ourselves. Otherwise, why would we work with a startup, right? I think there are some situations, especially I would say when you work with public companies, that tend to try to confirm deals with startups right before their annual report. So there's definitely a publicity element to it, but that's the more irrational aspect, I would say. So I think for us, really, the main thing is access to capabilities, hedge on technology, in case something picks up, that we anticipate might happen in the future, we want to have access to it. I think that's the main thing that we'll be looking for.
So when you're talking about the long term in particular, to have access to it, is your opinion what you're looking for? Is it something like, okay, we're evaluating this particular company for long-term partnership and maybe investment, or more that, well, we just want to understand if this kind of technology is useful to us?
I think it all comes more from a business back, in the sense of we understand what are our priorities, what do we need in terms of tech stack to execute, or in terms of capabilities. It can also be commercial, supply chain, and whatnot, and which ones we can get. And basically, in my team, for example, we already identified what are our, so to speak, white spots or hunting grounds for the next 5 years. And after that, we long list and short list potential startups. And of course, we don't see everything. So if somebody wants to approach us, we'll consider.
Okay. Excellent. And okay. Felix and Aveek, I've got a question for you. I've got a different version of this question for you a bit later on. But what I'm curious about is, so in terms of giving advice to other startups who want to engage with enterprises, robotics or otherwise, what are the things that you've found in your own experience that are like critical for getting enterprises to trust you, to consider you a trustworthy partner, and to engage in this first POC or this first engagement?
Right. I already mentioned I joined the company 4 years ago, so I give this all with a caveat, but I've talked at length about all of this with the founders, and it's been my experience too. I think there's a number of things, and it boils down to 3 or 4. One is, of course, the story must make sense. Your pitch must be good, the product must be good, it must all fit together. The story must be convincing. It must make logical sense for them to join you to make this trial happen. There's a little bit more where you can just strategically, salesmanshipy, if you don't do it, someone else might. You might lose out. Create some fear, create some FOMO. Definitely an element. But really the biggest thing is probably passion. You got to be in it. You have to sell it. You have to make them believe, and you have to actually do it, that you will go all the way. Your passion for this product or for this trial must be obvious. They must be able to believe it genuinely. If they don't believe that you will go all the way, that you will solve this problem, come hell or high water, that you will be there whenever something goes wrong, the doubt will be there, you will have to just fight for it. And that readiness, you have to transmit it.
Now that's interesting because Japanese executives at Japanese companies have a reputation, a very well-deserved reputation, of being very dry and practical and data-oriented. So you might think that the first instinct would be to provide that data, to provide that kind of dry, factual presentation, but you're saying that the passion, the salesmanship is really the key driver.
I would separate those two, and I would put the passion definitely at number one. The passion and your reliability, because you mentioned, sure, Japanese business may run on data and be a bit dry, but it also runs on trust and a reputation. And your trust is everything. And your reputation in this regard, do you follow up? Do you go all the way? Will you be there when shit hits the fan? That's your currency.
Aveek, what's been your experience?
I'll come at it from a pretty different way because we are a very early stage startup, right? So when I first moved to Japan, there were just two of us. So the way it worked for us was, you have to basically connect with the right people. The right people, depending on we are in the industrial space. Unfortunately, we are all in industrial space. So out there, you have to find the right partners who are, either they're looking for a problem and they have customers that they work with, which means like research and consulting companies, or system integrators. They go around and they, integrate a lot of big systems for big customers and they know the gaps, right? So you need to find partners like us, as like we did with, for example, we work with Nippon Express Research and Consulting, and that helps you identify whether, who are the right people you can go after, and if you get the introduction through someone they trust, then you're sort of, you're going in at a certain level of trust. But after that, you definitely have to prove that you're better than the competition, and of course, in our case, we did have to supply the sales material, Japanese sales material, which looks like, pages and pages of, but as Felix said, that it definitely helps to have the right, drive to sell. But in our case, as I said, we had to basically go through established channels and, partners in research and consulting, and also find the people who are really hungry for the solution, as in they have tried other competing solutions and it did not work. So that makes it, because they're hungry for it, it made it somewhat easier. It wasn't like, a long-term waiting because they have been looking for a while.
Well, it's always easier to sell to people who know they have a problem.
Exactly.
Dennis, I want to turn this around in your case a little bit and say, from your perspective, what's a red flag? What are some things that if you see in a presentation or you hear startups promising or saying that it just tells you that this startup is not ready yet? They're not ready for the collaboration. What kind of things are those?
That's a good question. I'll say the first one that comes to mind is sometimes you see, let's say, excess of passion. And what I mean by this is sometimes it turns into, hey, you guys don't know how it works in Silicon Valley. Like you're these kind of old school, Japanese or German or whatever companies. You just don't think big enough, right? And that the first flag is, first of all, that might be right. But the issue is that the company is not listening to you, because especially in the industrial space, you guys know the product cycles, right? We're talking about, in Japan, 48 months of development for most machinery, automotive, or whatever else, and then a life cycle of the product of 14, 15, 20 years. And you cannot get in a relationship with somebody that doesn't listen to you. So I think that would be the first thing. And the second thing is, and this is very related, you're looking for somebody that fits you. And Japan is quite fragmented. Even if you look at exactly the same space, be it, specific components or let's say systems or whatnot, all the companies are different. Some are more vertically integrated, some do their own development, some have their own system integration teams, some don't. So you need to know who you're dealing with and not so much push exactly your solution. Go with a proposal, but very quickly turn it around and understand what they need, and then come back with a counter offer to that.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. A lot of the media are focused on telling enterprises that they need to move faster, they need to understand how quickly startups work, and that is true, they do. But your point is excellent. It's a two-way street. The startups need to understand the workflow and the needs of the customer, or they're going to be difficult to deal with.
Exactly, yeah. And by the way, I think if you think about the long game, you can still disrupt the company this way, because what happens is if you show them, as you said, that you're a reliable partner that can deliver, later I've seen many companies that try to, talking about again strategic investments, they'll actually be very interested to how can I secure this team almost as a management team that can then transform the rest of the organization. So reliability is key.
Okay. Coward, do we have time for one more question, or do we move to Q&A? One more, okay. It's going to have to be a quick one. So, and Denis, I'm going to let you go first for a change.
Sounds good.
So, in actual projects, what mistakes have you seen that have caused initial collaborations to fail? And like, how could those be avoided? How can we learn from other people's mistakes rather than our own?
Yeah, another good question. I think one of the mistakes I've seen is sometimes trying to keep too much of a perfect face in front of the partner that you're dealing with. I think what I've seen, and this was sometimes in the case of partnerships and sometimes in the case of partial acquisitions or investments, that if you don't share as a startup what are the gaps that you have, where you really need help from the other side, and if not help from the other side, the help from a third party, then issues come, very significant issues after a number of years. And just as some examples, for example, you might have a very talented engineering team that is not ready for design for manufacture, that doesn't have the QA experience, that doesn't know how to, in the future, design a product to be produced at scale where, you need to have whatever level of precision and reliability that automotive expects, right? And the worst thing is that you spend for 2 years in development, and then you try to go from sample A to sample B, and you start seeing everything break down, because then you've already invested so much time and money, and it's very hard to come back from it. I would say it's better to be open up front and say, here's where we're really strong, here's where we need help, right? And let's find out how to fix it.
That makes sense. I mean, it's signaling that they will be a good, honest partner with you for the long term. Felix, what's been your experience?
I like your answer. I think I like it more than what I was about to say, which is colored by the fact that we're sort of 15 years in now, not an early stage startup anymore, but it still comes to my mind, which is if you overfit to what your customer wants, then you might lose track of what you were trying to set up to do, and you lose your product market fit in a different way. So there's not only that early stage risk, but then later on, if you deal with a big promising customer who has all of this stuff that you could integrate with, all of this opportunity, you'll be dragged along by them. There's a real risk of that too. So that's a pitfall. That's a potential trap you can fall into.
Excellent.
Yeah, I mean, those are all interesting things. I never thought about it quite that way, especially what Denis said. But I mean, I think that there are, I mean, I don't know what else I should add to it, but are we talking about mistakes that we have observed ourselves or other people?
Well, ideally, but anything that give me mistakes you've seen other people make as well.
I don't know. We can talk about ourselves. I mean, that's easier. You don't throw stones, Anyway, so basically, it's about managing customer expectations. So that's pretty much it, right? So if you go in the first day and you sell hard, as you said, with passion and with data and everything, and then you promise something, and then the customer likes it and comes back after or almost when you're ready to deploy and ask for really strange additional things, there's two ways out of it. One is because you're a startup, you can go crazy and solve it. In some cases that may work, But the other option is to just push back and say, hey, this is not what we agreed to, but when we do this again, we will, work on this and, maybe have this feature ready for you for the next fiscal year or whatever.
I think that ties in real well with what Dennis was saying about admitting your limitations, admitting when something is not what you agreed to or what you expected, and just keeping those lines of communication open.
It's definitely one facet of it, but there's also another facet, which is if you let your engineers talk to the customer too much, they will promise the world. Very easy for them to say yes to.
Putting engineers in front of customers is always a very risky proposition. Well, listen, I want to move on to Q&A, but first I want to give a quick round of applause to our panelists. And open it up for anyone that has questions. Do we have someone running a mic? I think you're just going to have to shout.
So I've been seeing a lot of competition coming from some of the US-based startups, and they're trying to enter the Japanese market. And I kind of feel like most of the US startups have good amount of funding. They can innovate fast, they can scale, and their teams are super big. But on the other side, Japanese startups don't have enough funding. They cannot scale. The team that I've known had 2 people. They still have 2 people. They cannot even scale to like 4 people till now. And this is a big gap that I feel. And also in last 4 years of working in robotics, I feel like Japan is going more on the application side of the robotics. They want to outsource a lot of these things. They don't want to innovate. So they don't want to support a lot of these startups in Japan. What do you think about it? And do you think like this is the direction of what's your views on it?
Okay.
You going?
Okay. Well, firstly, I think the good news is that I think Japan is picking up at least on the AI skill side, right? So I feel that now, there are enough, Japanese people working in robotics that if they can embrace, more AI tools, they can be way more, productive. So they can outnumber bigger teams with bigger funding. So that's one aspect of it. And the second thing is, the knowledge of how things work in Japan. I think that trumps, anyone coming in from outside, unless you're like OpenAI and, you're handing out tokens to everyone. That's a different kind of play. But I think a local startup definitely has a big advantage. It has disadvantages, as you mentioned, but I think the best thing they can do is to leverage the, AI tools, and also, based on what we say, right? Try to go for, serious customers and try to be patient and understand what they want instead of pushing their product hard. And I'm advising a bunch of actually Japanese startups, and I'm seeing, the talent is superb. It's just, just understanding, how they can navigate these, industrial clients versus, people asking for demos, right? So that's I would say. But I think they can do more with what's going on, and US startups just have the huge money advantage, basically.
If I can add a bit to that. So I think you touched on a number of important issues, but 2 I'd like to home in on. One is in terms of the robotics startups, Japanese companies that want to compete with China on producing hardware, especially full system hardware, that's a tough proposition. Now, there are Japanese companies and potentially startups that are part of the supply chain that do produce very important components in both the manufacture of the robotics and the robots themselves, and that makes a lot of sense. But just because of the capital requirements and the potential scale, it makes more sense in general for Japanese startups to focus on the application or the software side. In terms of the fundraising, I think this is true not only of Japan, but of any market except for China and the US, is that once you hit a certain level of capital requirements, you've got to go to the US. I mean, if you need to raise $100 million, you're not going to do that here, So I think that's an unfortunate reality, but it is a reality now. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe if I can add a little bit to this, I think so Japan is one of the countries with the strongest home turf advantage that I've ever seen. It's basically in every single sector with very, very few exceptions. I mean, most of the products in Japan are basically Japanese, right? I think you explained very well how most likely the ecosystem would evolve in the future. I would say that the only maybe additional risk that there is that a big Japanese player decides to partner with a US company and tries to bring them to Japan. I think that's maybe the real risk. But other than that, I mean, even large, they're not startups anymore, like large companies like Uber struggled in Japan because Japan in the mobility space is such a particular market. Unless you understand how to navigate it, it's very hard to survive. I think it's a bit similar with also the robotic space.
It's a good point. I have very little to add, except, yes, if you have huge capex and you need 100 million, then you just need to go to the US. It's so much money there. You train for a few weeks, you pick up an egg, suddenly you can raise it 50 billion valuation. It's nuts.
If only it were so easy.